Okay, I think it's just 1 o'clock right now.
Right.
So it's on already.
Okay.
I texted Bruce, but I know he had activities, so I'm not sure if he's going to look at his thing. And I just don't know why Javier has been reminded.
You're on, Cliff, already.
Okay. I'm just going to wait a bit. People are hearing our chit chat, of course.
We need a little stand up or music.
We could have opened with the Mexican national anthem.
Yeah.
It would be fitting today, especially.
Yeah.
There's a great video called Playing for Change, and they play La Bamba, but it's people from all over the world. So it opens up in Oaxaca with a guy playing the arpa, playing the harp, and then it goes to East Los Angeles for Los Lobos, and then it has Africa, Argentina, Cuba, everywhere. It's
Those are neat videos.
amazing.
Those are splendid.
Yeah, they're wonderful.
Okay, well, let's get underway. Welcome to the Global Justice Report, an online production of the Center for Global Justice. And for today's program, the Center for Global Justice, El Centro para la Justicia Global, is a multinational and bilingual research center located in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. The center is devoted to research and learning for a better world and empowering a solidarity economy. Due to the pandemic, we've discontinued our in-person events and instituted online webinars. Without our previous revenue-generating programs, we now depend on your donations to support these webinars and to be able to pay our Mexican staff. You can donate at our website, www.globaljusticecenter.org. Today's program is More Than Neighbors, U.S.-Mexican Solidarity. We are doing this in partnership with the Mexico Solidarity Project. Let me say a word about what they are. It's a group of activists from various socialist and left organizations and individuals committed to worker and global justice, who see the 2018 election of Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador as president of Mexico as a watershed moment. AMLO and his progressive Morena party aim to end generations of corruption, impoverishment, and subservience to U.S. interests. The Mexico Solidarity Project supports not just Morena, but all Mexicans struggling for basic rights and opposes U.S. efforts to undermine organizing and Mexico's national sovereignty. Mexico has just had a midterm election, and our panelists will be talking about that, I'm sure, in the course of our discussions. And some of you may well have questions and want to have updates on that. But let me turn the floor over to Metsu Louis, who will chair the panel with her fellow members of the Mexico Solidarity Project. Take it away, Metsu.
Thank you, Cliff. We really appreciate your invitation to be here today. And there you are in Mexico. So it's very fitting for you to be hosting something specifically on Mexico Solidarity. Bill, would you just take over for a second? This is Bruce, and we're waiting for Javier. So let me just, oh, he just hung up. Sorry.
Yeah, he was trying to call me, and I said, "Sorry, dude, I'm on a webinar."
Yeah, I think we're hoping to have Javier Bravo from Mexico, who is a member of Morena, to be on this webinar. He's missing in action. It could be due to the election yesterday, not really sure, but hopefully he'll join us as time goes on here. But yes, thank you, Cliff, for that introduction. The Mexico Solidarity Project is a couple of years old now, and it began when some of us noticed, beginning with some comrades in Liberation Road, a longtime socialist organization based in the United States, that there really wasn't much being done about solidarity with Mexico. And why was that, given how close it is? It's not even just a neighbor, as our blurb says. It's really more like a half brother. And we will explore today a little bit why we say that. And we'll begin with that, which is the annexation of 40% or more of Mexico, and what the significance of that was for people both in the United States and also in Mexico, and in that space in between that was Mexico one day, and all of a sudden people found themselves that they were living in the US the next. So Bill, you've written about the significance of annexation. Can you, give us a little bit more about your take on that?
Sure. Thank you, Meju. Well, I want to just thank everyone for being here with us to have this conversation. And I just want to start off with kind of a critique generally of the left in the United States and the progressive movements, liberals and liberal media, progressive media, for pretty consistently ignoring this issue of not just the annexation, but what happened after 40% or more of Mexico's northern territories were taken by military force. What did it do to the United States? What did it do to the conquered people of those territories, especially along the border? And what did it do to Mexico? So one of the, I want to just say there's kind of three large issues that I think are connected to the annexation. One is that it was probably a major factor in the United States becoming the dominant superpower in the world capitalist system. So the annexation of these territories enabled it to do a major expansion of its settler population, literally from coast to coast. And also it enabled it to acquire the enormous resources and wealth of these regions. So just the ones that we know about: fossil fuel, coal, oil, gas. If Mexico had held on to these territories, it would be the largest, actually, oil producer in the country, larger than Saudi Arabia. So large, zinc, copper, uranium, some of the most fertile agricultural lands in the world, not just in this country, but in the world. And of course, now it had access to the Pacific Rim through the port system that was established especially along the West Coast. The third largest port system in the world is the one of Los Angeles and Long Beach, and 80% of the commodities from the Pacific Rim come in through those ports. So this was a huge political, economic, social acquisition for US capitalism. And it's not like without these lands, the United States would still be a very powerful country, probably something like Germany or Japan, but it wouldn't be the superpower that it is. So I think that's one of the things that we need to look at is really the important significance of this in terms of creating the system that we're trying to get rid of and replace with something much more humane and socialist.
So,
The
Bill,
second thing, yeah.
oh, no, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, the second thing is, what did this do to Mexico? It turned Mexico into a dependent country. So, it's a part of the global South, but it kind of sealed its dependence, especially on the Colossus to the north. So Mexico, it's a large country, 2,000-mile border with the United States, a population of 128 million, second largest economy in the hemisphere. It's a very, very, it's a large, wealthy country, but it's a dependent country. It is a country of the global South. And the annexation contributed in large measure to that status for Mexico. So that was kind of the second major political impact. The third is what happened to the conquered people in these territories, especially the indigenous and the Mexican populations that lived in these historic areas of concentration in South Texas, in New Mexico, in Arizona, Southern Colorado, California. What happened to them? So for the indigenous people, they became incorporated into the genocidal and dispossessive wars of the United States. So what began in the East Coast was now extended coast to coast with the indigenous peoples of these areas, these territories. But for the conquered Mexican people, it kind of created a new situation where, even though the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo said you're going to be allowed to assimilate with this new society, that in fact did not happen. That racism and national oppression precluded their becoming a part of the Anglo-European majority. That never happened. And the annexation itself precluded the possibility of these areas evolving along with the developing Mexican nation. So it couldn't evolve it maintained significant contacts with Mexico, of course, but it did not evolve in the way that Mexico evolved as a third world country, as a global South country. But it was also, this population was also not able to assimilate. Like, let's say, as were the Italian Americans or the Irish Americans or Polish Americans who've come here. So that was precluded. So what happened to this population? Well, it became an oppressed population. It became an oppressed population, strong historical roots to the land, its own, established language and culture. So there was this kind of new area which, entered into a new reality. And post-annexation, so the United States had to consolidate this conquest. And in the southwestern US, it put into place all of the basic institutions, the structures of oppression for the Chicano-Mexicano people in those areas. So housing segregation, education segregation, wealth inequality, job inequality, language inequality, cultural inequality, healthcare inequality, the denial of the right to vote, denial of the right for political representation. In addition to that, in later years, the question of this, the militarization of the border and the use of not only the indigenous police forces, the native police forces, which served as an occupying army, but also now the Border Patrol and that incredible military apparatus that's used not only against Mexican immigrants, but against the areas and the peoples where those immigrants reside when they come north of the border. So this was the new reality. And what this led, especially for the more radical sections of the Chicano population, was to say, well, we have national rights here. Obviously assimilation is not in the plan. And what we want is self-determination. We want the right to govern ourselves. We want the right to run our own schools, the right to have equality and freedom for our language and our culture, the right to the lands that were stolen from us. So this became kind of a recurring theme early on in Chicano history, but throughout the Chicano history, this demand for self-determination, sometimes it was expressed poetically or musically, sometimes it was expressed in manifestos, but it's been a recurring theme. And for the US left, this question becomes, what do we make of this movement, which styles itself a liberation movement of nearly 40 million people in this strategic area along the border with Mexico, one of the most important countries from the standpoint of US imperialism in the world? What do we make of this? how does it fit into our conception of social change and our fight for socialism and the organizations that we're trying to build, including the political party that would help us to work together for socialism? So there's a lot of questions that arise from this question of annexation that unfortunately the left in large measure has failed to grapple with.
I would just add that the argument for annexation just continued from that time to the present. I just remember as a kid learning the song "America the Beautiful," "Oh beautiful for spacious skies," and then it says, "God shed His grace on thee." America, America, God shed His grace on thee from sea to shining sea. And I remember as a kid just thinking, what a beautiful song. And I didn't realize until much later that it was a song propagandizing the divine right of the United States to expand from one ocean to the other. So I think just, it's ingrained in us, even as kids in school, that this is something that is great, that we did a good thing here by annexing. Nobody talks about that part in school.
Right. And what does it mean to say the halls of that song? What's the song? From the halls of Montezuma to the shore. There's a meaning to that.
That's the Marine anthem, I think. Yep. So yeah, the numbers of times that the U.S. has invaded Mexico, I think it's 14 times or something like that. But I was also going to say that from the point of view of people that lived in those annexed territories, the Mexico Solidarity Project has a bulletin which we put out every week. And a couple of weeks ago, we interviewed Rosalinda Guillen, who has become a farm worker organizer par excellence. She's fantastic. But her family has lived in what was Mexico and now the United States for generations. They owned a farm in what became Texas. And the story also that is not told is that in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the Mexicans were supposed to be able to maintain the ownership of that land. But this is where language justice comes in too, because a lot of contracts were written in English and they didn't know English. A lot of the land was simply stolen away from the Mexican owners, so that her family, which started out as having their own farm in Mexico, became farm workers in Texas and then moved to Washington, but lost everything and became impoverished. So annexation has ripples that still affect people in the United States today and in Mexico who have families on the other side of the border.
Me too.
Yes.
You'll be happy to see that Javier has joined us now.
Oh, yay. Wonderful, Javier. I can't see you.
Javier, turn on your camera and unmute yourself.
Hey, guapo, ¿dónde estás?
Hello, Javier. Thank you so much for joining us. We got started already and have talked about that first question about the significance of annexation. And I know you've been super busy with the election, and we will get to that in a bit. But the annexation is really the story of government to government relations. And when you talked about the dependency bill, I mean, when a neighboring country can just invade you and in short order force you to give up 40% of your land, you know that you're in trouble for a long, long time. But what was going on among the people? Bill, you did mention the formation of some Chicano identity, but what kind of cross-border organizing was going on? And maybe, Bill, let's start with you, and then Javier, we'll talk a little bit more about just organizing against the imperium in Mexico.
Well, for generations and generations, the border was very porous. People just crossed, pretty freely from Mexico into the United States and vice versa. And over the years, because the United States established a very thriving capitalist economy here, a lot of people stayed. This is where they went. They helped build the railroads. They helped develop the agricultural system. They worked in the mines. They worked in manufacturing. So a lot of the economy of this area was built by people who came over from Mexico and then settled in these areas of historic concentration in South Texas and so on and so forth. And but they retained their contacts in Mexico. You know, they still had familia, they still had, and there was a lot of political cross-border organizing. So I'll just talk about the ones that I'm familiar with. In the 1960s, of course, there was a very powerful social movement in Mexico and it was a big demonstrations at the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City in Tlatelolco. And it was attacked, brutally attacked by the Mexican government. And people were murdered and people were injured and people were imprisoned and tortured. But a lot of folks from the Chicano movement on this side of the border provided support for people from there. So people that wanted to cross the border for their own safety were taken into Chicano homes, Chicano families. There was a lot of cross-border mixing. And in addition to this, a lot of the folks on both of these sides, they were very radical. They were turning to Marxism, or they were already Marxists. So there was a lot of cross-fertilization about what it meant to be Marxist, what Marxism looked like in our country, what Marxism looked like in their country. You know, there was talk about how do we build solidarity. So that happened, but even prior to that, in the 20s and in the 30s, there were a lot of cross-border organizing by the anarchists under Ricardo Flores Magón. And I know some friends of mine, their parents were part of the anarchist organization of Flores Magón, and they used to have rallies here in East Los Angeles at Olvera Street. There's a big kiosco there, and they would have their rallies there. And the police would send in the Red Squad and just round people up and throw them in jail for this. So there was already this kind of cross-border connection, especially between the radical sectors, but not just the radical sectors, the unions. When they had the copper strike in Cananea, there was support from the IWW. So there's always been this kind of connection between folks on this side of the border, the Chicanos on this side of the border, and the Mexicanos in El Sur. So that tradition, I'm more familiar. In the 60s, it became even stronger, and then it really flowered when the Zapatistas rose up against the North American Free Trade Agreement. That just had enormous impact, of course, in Mexico and Latin America, but also here in the Chicano liberation struggle. The Zapatistas had organized as a way of connecting with the people these consultas, and you saw those everywhere in San Antonio, in Los Angeles, in Northern California, in Arizona, in Colorado. People were using the Zapatista Madla de Consulta to really connect with people and say, what do we want to see here in our city? What are the budgets that we want to see in our city? How do we want to handle the repression of the police? What do we want our schools to look like? So there was always this kind of cross-border connection, but it became even stronger when the Zapatistas rose up against the North American Free Trade Agreement. And there was, of course, a lot of controversy around the North American Free Trade Agreement, which was pushed by the administration of Bill Clinton. And there was strong opposition from the US labor movement, but it had very strong support from the environmental justice community here. A lot of those environmental justice organizations organized in Latino and Chicano and Latino communities. And the large green organizations supported NAFTA, like the Sierra Club and the National Resources Defense Council. The organizations like the Southwest Organizing Project and others supported the people in Mexico, the Zapatistas, and the US labor movement in opposing the North American Free Trade Agreement as something that would further the dependency and exploitation of Mexico.
Thanks, Bill. And I think that what you're saying is important because just the lessons that we can learn about how to be more democratic from Mexico and the indigenous people there is quite amazing. You know, the left has grabbed onto the idea of people's assemblies and public budgeting, and those were ideas that came, as you mentioned, from the Consulta of the Zapatistas. we did an issue 2 about their different way of exercising democracy. It doesn't have to be done by elections. They have a way where people are really nominated out of the people, and the leaders that are eventually chosen are there to serve. They're really asked to serve the people, not to line their pockets, as happens in so much of the electoral politics that we see. So Javier, too, can you talk a little bit about the organizing that was going on in Mexico against foreign domination, against US imperialism, that eventually led to the rise of Morena?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I would like to approach the subject this way. Since 1846, 1848, we are aware that Santana, the then president of Mexico, Santana, signed the annexation. He agreed with the annexation, but we all the time forget to talk about that he was imprisoned, he was tortured, and he signed up the documents under torture while he was in prison. So he there's a lot of bad things about Santana, mistakes that he made, some awkward policies he implemented, but there is also a fact that he signed the documents of the annexation under the pressure of imprisonment and torture. So if there was justice in the world, we could sue the United States since they are occupying stolen land, and it is documented. So in this approach, I think it all makes sense. The resistance of the several movements to annexation could have his fundamentals in the law, in international rights. So right now there is it's very important to our movement to support all the migrant organizations in the US. Right now there's tens, hundreds of organizations of immigrants. They are there, and they are in a very not convenient. I wanted to use Gramsci's term. They are subordinated. They are 4 generations within the United States. So I think that not just for is not just a matter of supporting those organizations of our paisanos in the US or Chicano organizations, but also to improve a new way to reading our history, because history can inspire the race of more organizations that are fighting, struggling for human rights of the people living there and living here. A lot of Mexican people within our country, in the border municipalities of Mexico, are working in factories that belong to U.S. capital, and they are being treated as slaves, as enslaved people. So for me, it's very important to get closer to all the unions, of the maquiladoras in the northern branch of Mexico, all the municipalities where maquiladoras are working right now, not only belonging to US capital, but also Mexican capital, to approach to them and get closer to them. I am speaking not as a Morena member, but just like a leftist fellow citizen in Mexico. It is imperative to me to get close to all the current organization, unions, and people working for, for the Central American migrant people that are settled, that have settled already in Mexico, not just in Tijuana, but all the way, along the border. People from Haiti and many other countries, they have already settled in Mexico because they don't have a place to go back. They don't have a home already in Guatemala, in El Salvador, in Haiti, in some other countries. So I think there is a silent struggle for people to live in all that territory that used to be part of Mexico. The most large amount of that territory doesn't belong to Mexico anymore. It is an illegal, but it is a whole thing. It's not two different countries. It's one people, very diverse, trying to survive, to live in normal, in conditions with dignity, defending their rights to labor rights, migration rights, rights to have a home, healthcare, education, and so on and so on. So there are some organizations that have been supported by Mexican government, especially during the government of Vicente Fox or also Felipe Calderon, and they supported also Mexicans in the US, giving them money, but they are not receiving money anymore from Mexican government, so they can be a little bit upset because of that. But there are ways that we as citizens, as a movement, as part of our project to support Mexicanos or Chicanos or Centroamericanos in both parts of the border. So for me, it's very important to try to persuade people that they have a very large repertory of for fighting, vast repertory of public action, and we must support them. We must give voice to them because they are lacking of a voice. If we have the ability to write about them, about their struggle, we must do that. We have to give voice to them. So I know that I didn't answer directly your question, Meiju, but I am really concerned about doing something for the impoverished people, not just as part of Morena, but also as part of this movement, this project. I love this project because it goes beyond political parties. It puts in front of us the deepest cause to fight for is the necessity of the people who are suffering there in the United States or here in Mexico.
So that people to people, person to person connection is really critical. And, you know, as we say in the feminist movement, the personal is political, and that is the best way to really form those bonds that require you to, you know, be on each other's side. So Javier, I wondered though, if you could now talk a little bit about what happened in the election yesterday and what was the significance of the election, the midterm election. AMLO and Morena won big, surprisingly and overwhelmingly in 2018. They won so big that the usual fraud and corruption could not stop them from taking office. And as in the United States, midterm elections are usually a referendum on the presidency and on the party in power. So what happened yesterday and what do you think is its significance?
Well, for me, the most important thing is that we kept, I would say, in our hands, the majority in the lower house, La Cámara de Diputados. We have the majority, a simple majority, together with our allies, the PT, Partido del Trabajo, and right now the Verde. They are, you know, opportunists, but they are now with us. So
The Green Party.
we keep the majority in the lower house. So it is possible through negotiation to keep changing the constitution to imprint our constitution with a more social vocation, with a more clearly popular vocation. So we lost several places, several diputados, but we still keep the majority.
What was the final vote?
Oh,
You know?
we don't have yet the final
Not
vote,
yet.
but the tendency is that with our allies in the lower house, in La Cámara de Diputados, will be more than 52, 53% together with our allies. So it's very important for Morena to learn from its mistakes, because we made many mistakes. We hoped that we would increase the majority in the lower house, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen. I mean, a lot of people voted yesterday, more than in 2018. But the vote was more dispersed. I'm not trying to blame anyone, but if I tried hard to find people to blame for this situation, I would say that the Morena's president is Mario Delgado. His name is Mario Delgado. He just some years ago was supporting Peña Nieto's reforms as part of the PRD, the PRD, and then suddenly he switched into Morena, and with the help of Marcelo Ebrard and some other, politicians from the first circle of AMLO, he became the main leader of Morena. He's taking some wrong decisions of opening Morena more than we wish to people that are not leftists. They are panistas and priistas, and here is the result of that internal policy of opening our doors to anyone who has a trajectory, has some experience in the lower house or the Cámara de Senadores, but it's not just a matter of, having experience. What kind of experience? I mean, what kind of politician have you been during all these years of neoliberalism in Mexico? So there's a series of wrong decisions have conducted us to this situation where we have a very like a compromised majority. We have the majority, but to change the constitution, we have to negotiate harder. And that means that the changes in the constitution or the creation of other laws in a different level, not in the highest level of the constitution, but some other laws about education or pensions and et cetera, will be harder to develop, to make it irreversible. That was our intention, to make some changes irreversible. Well,
So
it doesn't
Javier?
exist, that thing of irreversibility in lawmaking, but at least to put as much locks to make it as irreversible as it is possible.
But how about the governorships?
Well, we have the majority of the governorships. As I know right now, it's at least 9 or 10 of the, but we don't have final results yet. So
Okay, because the governors have quite a lot of power too, as we found in the case of Susana Prieto, who was organizing maquila workers, and then she became put under house arrest by the PAN governor of the place that she lived. So the governors do have power as well. So I know Morena was hoping to win more of those leadership positions as well.
Well, yes. Right now, we can more or less firmly say that we have 10 of 15 governorships, 10 of 15. So let me see, it will be Baja California Sur, Campeche, Colima, Guerrero, Nayarit, Sinaloa, Sonora, Tlaxcala, y Zacatecas. But more or less firmly, we would say that we won.
Okay, that's great. So, yep, there were 15 up for grabs, and there are 32 states. So only 15 though were going through elections. Bill, I wondered, what do you think is the significance of these midterm elections in Mexico for those of us in the United States?
Well, I think the bigger question is what can we do here to support the people that are trying to help Morena grow in a good direction, to hold on to power and to grow in a good direction. So Morena is a relatively new party. They surprised everyone. They won this huge majority locally, statewide, in cámaras, in presidency. And now they have to both consolidate and govern. So govern means you got to keep the streets clean. You got to make sure the lights stay on. You got to make sure that the firefighters are there. You have to do all of the things that are involved with governing, like every revolution has had to do, whether it's liberated base areas or the Zapatistas with their regents. You have to learn how to effectively govern. So they've had this at the same time as a new entity. They're having to consolidate. And of course, it's not surprising that every opportunist from the PRI and the PAN thought, well, I think I'll join Morena and get me a good job. And, I can help you set up your sanitation system. I can help you get your libraries working or whatever, So they're having to deal with a very, very complex situation, having gone through a pandemic, because the pandemic affected every pueblito in Mexico, and with the United States still kind of looming like a vulture over right across the border. So I think the outcome of the success or failure of Morena has huge implications for Mexico, for Latin America, and for us here in the United States. And it seems to me that one of the things that they have to confront is not only this question of people from the PRI and the PAN coming into the party, but how do you build out a leadership? We face this here all the time. How do you build out leadership so that you do have people that that are honest and progressive and aren't out for the money and aren't just opportunists who can help you govern? How does Morena, at the same time that they have to govern, they can't wait. They can't say, hold on a second, we want to train 100,000 new leaders to help us govern, to help us maintain our contact with the people, to help us whatever. They have to do it all at the same time. And in the meantime, they have to run an economy that is a dependent economy that still has enormous interconnections with the United States and its economy. So there's this very complicated situation. There's still the oligarchy. The PRI and the PAN are still entrenched. The media is still in control of the ruling class. The military is still in control of the ruling class. So this is the context in which this new vibrant party is trying to develop. And it's in many ways faces greater challenges than the Zapatistas did, because the Zapatistas are in Chiapas, they're in that region, and they've been able to kind of carve out an area where they can create their social experience. Morena doesn't have that. Morena has to govern, whether it's in Guanajuato and Morelia or wherever they now have to govern, and they have to consolidate. So this outcome is not for certain. Regardless of what happens with AMLO, obviously we want him to be successful in the progressive policies, but he's gone in another 3 years, más o menos. But we want Morena to be strong, to be vibrant, to continue going in a progressive direction. So I think from our side of the border, what can we do to support that? So the idea of how do we get out honest information about what's going on in Mexico? Because most of the stuff we see here in the mainstream media, but even on the left, it's very sparse. The mainstream media, of course, it's almost always anything they can to attack AMLO and Morena, but especially AMLO. But even on the left, the coverage of Mexico is really sparse. So we need to figure out ways to really get the word out over here to our left, to our progressive movements. And so we need to have lines of communication so people can know, what does it mean now that you can build an independent union in Mexico? What does it mean that they're putting resources into the education and healthcare system? What does it mean that they're helping people on pensions? How do we do that? What are the new relationships with the indigenous peoples to support indigenous rights? So we have to help get the word out. And then I think we need to build links, unions to unions, environmental justice organization to environmental justice organization, art and cultural links. We need to, the kinds of programs that we held for Professor Bravo here in the United States, we need to do those everywhere, and not just us. We need to have our allies and friends working with us to bring over the people from Mexico, to get the word out over here about the important social experiment that's happening in this country. This one of the largest economy, 13th largest economy in the world, second largest population in Latin America, 2,000-mile border with the Yankees. The outcome of this has huge implications for us here. It's not just over there, it's over here. So I think we need to figure out, how do we build those ties? What are the concrete ways that we can build communication, information sharing, and solidarity?
Yeah. So not only does Morena and AMLO have to operate, as you were saying, they have to govern, they have to keep the streets clean, they have to try to implement their new program, and they all have to do it under the thumb of the imperium. So John Ackerman, who is a wonderful commentator on Mexico, says that the election yesterday was really about dealing a blow to neoliberalism. That if Morena, which is not it's not a socialist party, and AMLO is not a socialist by any means. However, he is an anti-neoliberal president who wants to maintain or get back some national sovereignty to prioritize the poor. How can they do that, though, with the left, with the United States breathing down their neck? So that really is our task, to make sure that they have the space to be able to carry out this experiment. And if the experiment succeeds, it will have, as you said, it will have ramifications for what the progressives and left movements in the United States are trying to achieve, which is the same thing, to shift, to put the working people of our countries at the center. So,
you know, I did want to ask Javier, because Kamala Harris is going to be there, or tomorrow. This is the first major contact between AMLO, the Mexican government, and the United States, the new administration. So what are the expectations there?
A close encounter of the third kind.
Yeah.
As I know, they have a specific agenda. It is about migration. So there's a lot of questions between our both our countries, but the agenda for this, the next meeting will be very concrete. The press has asked AMLO this morning if he's going to put in the agenda some other topics. For example, the funds United States are supporting the opposition with. They have received millions of pesos right here through American Embassy, but he answered more or less this. The agenda is already set, so they cannot break the agenda, or otherwise the dialogue will break, will be not possible. The diplomatic rules say that if you already agreed about a concrete agenda, you cannot break it just like that. So the topic will be migration, as I know. I think I'm not losing any other topic for next meeting, but some analysts here in Mexico said that AMLO will or may insist in vaccines, that he will insist in getting more vaccines from the US, and she will insist in migration because it was the agreed agenda. I don't know what will happen, but I know also that Mexico already sent a note about those funds that US government is giving to the opposition. The answer, Biden's answer, was that he will continue supporting the free press and fight against corruption all over the world. But we know that the people who are receiving those funds from the US are people that really don't need those money. They are millionaires. They are the biggest capitalists in Mexico. What they are getting from the US government is a moral support. They are the fifth column here in Mexico, and the other four columns are coming from the United States, trying to decide for us what to do here in Mexico. They, of course, are supporting all our neo-liberalists, and those money is not a matter of money. Is more a matter of moral support, a political support from Biden and his government to our rightist people. I also wanted to say that about the election, that in my state, Guanajuato, the PAN won almost every municipality but one, just one. We have 46 municipalities in the state of Guanajuato, and Morena won only one, Salamanca, the municipio de Salamanca. All those, we used to have one municipality governed by the Verde, some other Movimiento Ciudadano, 3 Morena, but right now we lost almost everything but one in Guanajuato. So the same scheme, the same wrong decisions in Morena in the national level are being taken here in the scale of our state. So we need to make a self critique and to learn from these mistakes. So it's a sad situation here in Guanajuato, a very sad situation.
Yeah, well, I would just say from the United States experience, midterm elections almost always go to the party that did not win the presidential election, and it's only 2 years. So that is kind of the trend. And in Mexico, I don't know if at least Morena hung on to the majority, unlike what usually happens in the United States. And this is the first time that a party like Morena has been in power and you didn't have all the fraud and corruption going on. So, so it's still part of this historical experiment that's going on in Mexico. So why don't we stop there, just because it's already been almost an hour here, and see if we have some questions and answers, and a little bit more hopefully will come out in terms of concretes of how we can support each other.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Yes, we'd like to open the floor for questions and discussion. There are some who are watching this on YouTube, and they're not able to get their correct questions to us directly. But if you are on YouTube, have a question or comment, you can email it to global.justice.cliff@gmail.com, and I'll pass your question on to those in the Zoom room. As for those who are in the Zoom room, if you have a question or comment, you can present it directly. And so let me turn on gallery view so I can see those who are in the Zoom room. And if you want to say something, just wave and I'll call on you. Who wants to go first? Well, while we wait for people to get their thoughts together, let me put a question that's been very much on my mind, and that has to do with energy policy. One of the crowning achievements of the Mexican Revolution was the nationalization of oil. And one of the crowning achievements of the previous administration, Peña Nieto, was to undo that by the neoliberal agenda of privatizing oil, or moving in the direction of privatization. As a result, no longer here in Mexico do all of the gas stations have the Pemex sign out front. Now we see Shell and BP and the other familiar brands. As transnational capital makes its inroads into the commercial distribution of oil, at least. Well, now, it seems to me that one of the important things that AMLO is trying to do is to undo that. Though with great difficulty, because under the revised NAFTA program, one of the things that was locked in was the existing property relations in the energy sector. And so AMLO is trying to undo that, particularly because, and this is a very conflicted situation, because a lot of the foreign investment in the energy sector that has come into Mexico now under the privatization is in developing of solar energy. And that's something that AMLO is trying to block and to reinforce and reestablish the dominance of the state-controlled fossil fuel industry. So, you get a conflict there. Left
Yeah.
would like to see more solar energy, but that ends up being private, and less fossil fuel energy, even even though that is state-owned. So I'd like our panelists' comments on this whole nest of conflicting issues around energy.
Well, I would say that what AMLO is doing is a very clever, very smart movement. He is not trying to, get rid of the NAFTA. What he is doing is trying to review every contract that private investors have to generate and distribute energy. And what we found out is that the majority of those contracts are very unfair. For example, if somebody invested in wind energy, but there's no wind, so they are not generating for days and days, they are not generating energy. So according to those contracts, the Mexican government would have to pay them a compensation because there is no wind. Some things so absurd. So is what AMLO says, contratos leoninos. That means that the lion's share is, the biggest share of the prey, of the cake. They never lose. They always win, and Mexican state always loses, always, according to those contracts. So many of those contracts are being fought by the Mexican government, showing that how unfair they are. That is why he's trying to put into function the hydraulic energy. Our dams were stopped, were looted, and were dismantled in order to give more contracts to private capital. What AMLO is doing right now is making those dams and hydraulic energy to switch on, to generate energy, all the energy they haven't produced for decades. They're buying some new turbines because the other ones were looted, were almost destroyed. And also he has, of course, we have to use fossil energy. We have to use oil because it's what we have. The industry and the transport in Mexico uses gasoline, So we have to do that. That is why he's restoring 6 refineries, building a new one, Dos Bocas, and also he during the government of Peña Nieto, of the neoliberal governments, Pemex acquired 50% of the auctions of the 50% of the property of one big refinery in Texas, and right now they bought the other 50%. It was a shell refinery. And now it belongs to Mexico. While the Shell company is trying to invest in clean energies, as they said, they are not losing anything. They have a project to support clean energies, and that's why they agreed to sell the other 50% to Mexico, the other 50% of the refinery. So it's functioning already, and the purpose of that policy is to be self-sufficient in gasoline for Mexico in the short term. So I am optimist in this case. I am optimist in this policy to try to produce more energy from our dams, because it's clean energy. It takes very little to turn on the turbines and start to generate energy. That is
So,
I wanted to say about that.
I wonder, Bill has been an activist in the environmental justice movement. Wondered what you think of this from the environmental point of view, Bill.
Well, you know, the nations of the global south have rightly pointed out that it's the industrialized countries of the West and Japan that are largely responsible for the climate crisis, overwhelmingly responsible for the climate crisis, and continue to contribute the great majority of greenhouse gases. And one of the demands that they've made, they say, look, we want to go to clean energy. We definitely want to have a transition to clean energy, solar energy, wind, hydro, and so on. But there should be reparations. We're poor. And part of the reasons that we're poor is because of the exploitations of imperialism. And there should be, their demand has been for a climate fund that would help countries of the global south to establish a clean energy system and to transition off of fossil fuel. Now, some countries like Mexico, Bolivia, and others, Venezuela, are largely reliant on fossil fuels for, it's a major source of their economy and a major source of revenue. So they can't immediately close it down. And there's been a lot of conflict and contradiction around this. For example, in Bolivia, where there was the Morales government supported the development of large natural gas projects. But they said, you know, until we get to the point where we can go completely to clean energy, we have to feed people. We have to put, you know, we have to pay for our schools so people can go to school. We have to pay for healthcare. We have to pay to raise the minimum wage. And I think Mexico is somewhat in a similar situation, that it's largely dependent, and not completely, but largely dependent on the fossil fuel industry. And it's going to take a transition to do this. And I think that transition is much more likely with the Morena government than it would be for the PRI and the PAN. But I think that's the situation that we have here, is that on our side, we have to help our comrades over here understand, because they're like, what is AMLO doing? Why are they buying refineries? Why are they trying to take over Pemex? Why are they continuing to support the fossil fuel industry? Well, it's not like they have 45 great, wonderful choices to develop their economy right now. They don't. They're a dependent country of the global south. So we have to help. We have to be supportive of the people in Mexico who are saying, we want a genuine transition, like Javier was saying. We want the hydro, we want the dams turned on. We want that energy turned on. And we want to control our own energy system. And we want to have a transition to a clean energy program. on our side, we have to be supportive of those movements that are trying to do that. But we also have to help our folks here who sometimes don't understand the conditions under which nations of the global south are developing. What are the actual options that exist for a lot of the progressive governments in the global south?
And in the United States, we don't have that excuse, and yet our transition is not exactly going all that fast either.
It's worse. We're here in California. California is supposed to be a beacon of the environmental justice, the progressive legislation. We're the third largest refinery state in the United States, Texas and Louisiana. Since we passed our pioneering greenhouse gas legislation, every single refinery in California has expanded its operations. Every single one.
And when you look
Tell
at
you who lives right near those refineries are Black and brown folks, or in the case of the Chevron refinery in Richmond, Black, brown, and Laotians.
So they're getting the environmental damage, but the fact that these oil refineries and so on are in the annexed territories, again, just shows how we stole resources from Mexico back when. So the idea of reparations is a good one.
On this question, I see our Mexican friend, Celia Pacheco, nodding. Did you want to, hello, Celia. Well, did you want to comment on this issue?
Hi, Cliff. Hi. I am too late here. I don't speak very well the English, but I am making an effort. I understand better than I speak, but I think you are very optimistic people here. I am too optimistic about AMLO. It's too complex to understand this, what is happening here. Yes, it is an experiment, as all in the whole world, too many movements. But I think AMLO has not too much to do. Finally, we are speaking about the economic world, and Mexico has very specific merchandises. Cliff helped me to express better the migration, the Mexican workers in the United States is the first resources here in Mexico, remesas. Mexico, it is more important for Mexico, the workers in the USA than oil. But we have, as excuse me, I don't see, with our friend from the Liberation Road, that we and Javier, that Mexico has petroleum. In the end, at last, in the end of the capitalism, Mexico has something to do with this too. I think it is very audaz, como Roberto, tú estás por ahí, ¿cómo se dice audaz? Is making, is very, well, excuse me, I can't explain it as I would like to do.
Why don't you just speak in Spanish, and Bill and Javier will be able to respond.
Okay, if Javier is
He's
you
still,
agree with this idea?
I'm here. Yeah, yeah, my pleasure. Will be my
Bueno.
pleasure.
Okay, thank you. Sí, yo creo que el tema de la refinería fuera de México muestra una gran audacia de AMLO y de una visión. Al final de cuentas, él tiene una visión de México, un plan económico, ideales de nación que ha proclamado, reivindicado. Y hace lo que puede con esto. Sí, Javier, ¿cómo le hacemos para que tú puedas?
Gracias. Bueno, dime tu nombre, por favor, otra vez.
Celia Pacheco, de la red,
Javier.
La Economía de los Trabajadores, que trabajamos con el Centro para la Justicia Global.
Celia says is that by buying this refinery in Texas, AMLO has shown audacity. He made a very good step in chess because it's part of his project. It's part of his project. He has the project of make Mexico more autonomous in terms of energy, and we have to use oil because it is what we have right now. But she has hope that it could inspire some other policies. But is happy with the meaning of these changes AMLO has been implementing.
La fuerza de trabajo en Estados Unidos es fundamental, una mercancía al final que se está manejando, lo vemos ahora con el tema de las vacunas, ¿no? Fuerza de trabajo contra vacunas, al final de cuentas, si uno se fija bien, ¿no? Ahí hay un juego político que está a la frontera, la migración, ¿no? El tema de el papel que juega México para Estados Unidos como su socio comercial, ¿no? El tema de la producción, de la producción agrícola en México y todos estos temas que AMLO, aunque tenga una visión nacionalista, en realidad poco puede hacer. El tema del Tren Maya, ¿no? Bueno, si quieres, Javier, este pedacito y ahora el Tren Maya.
Well, what Celia says that is very important, the working force of Mexicans in the US is very important, but is not the only thing. She says that, what about, ¿qué querías decir del Tren Maya? Perdón.
Ah, bueno, el tema del Tren Maya, que cuando AMLO entra, hay muchas cosas que ya están armadas en México y que tampoco ha podido hacer gran cosa excepto el aeropuerto, sino que tratar de acordar, ¿no? Cierta visión, una derrama local, ¿no? Que no sea tan brutal como aquel parque coreano que querían, esa Disneylandia coreana, ¿no? Okay. Que querían construir y que bueno, ese tipo de cosas, pues ordenarla, pero en realidad ahí el concepto del turismo también es otra gran mercancía, ¿no? O sea, el territorio como mercancía también. Y la administración, que poco puede hacer frente a eso, como mercancías, ¿no?
Celia says that is a very important thing, that AMLO is a patriot or nationalist, but in the good sense of the word, not aggressive, but he's concentrating in internal issues, such as the Tren Maya and social, social programs, which are very important, but is not spending money as former governments used to do. Some pharaonic projects that will not helpful for the people. Right now, he's doing a lot of projects he cannot resolve all the problems in Mexico of poverty or corruption, but he's doing a lot. He's concentrating in the internal policies. Te entendí bien, Celia, perdóname.
Sí, muy bien, Javier.
Gracias.
Un último tema sería, no sé si hablaron de la correlación de cómo queda la fuerza política ahora en México.
Cliff,
Sí, al principio hablamos de eso. Sí.
I wonder, Cliff, there's 3 hands up that I can see. Why don't we take all 3 of their questions just to get them on the table, and there's a few minutes left to answer them together or whatever.
Okay. Oh, I didn't see any hands. Go ahead and call on them.
Okay, Vicky? You're muted?
Sorry. Yeah, hi. Another controversial issue is migration patterns and the relationship between Central America, Mexico, and the US. And I wonder if you could explain it for the people in the United States who think the Mexican government should just, and AMLO should just solve the whole thing.
Yes, Norma? What's your
She's
question?
probably on mute too.
I don't see her on mute.
Oh.
Norma? Oh. Let's go to Carl then, and then Norma, I'll get you after.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. Okay, go ahead. Sorry,
Sorry
Carl.
about that. Stupid equipment. I was going, first of all, I want to mention that the adjustments about using fossil fuel should have been being made 30, 40 years ago, from 30, 40 years ago. You know, it was ignored until the devastation that's going on now. Been made by the rich countries that could afford to go ahead and do it. I just got a notice on my phone that Kamala Harris has told the people she's spoken to in Guatemala, disregarding the fact that United States destroyed Guatemala and much of Central and South America, destroyed them brutally. She's telling people not to come. I just got that on my phone now. And I'm wondering whether the government in Mexico would do a good thing by telling them, come to Mexico. You know, we have a revolution going on here. Come here and you have a haven, at least, regardless the fact that we can't feed you well, but we'll try. That's
Okay.
And the other thing is that the middle left, whatever we are, is calling governments that are not complying with the so-called standards of how to be communists are being called not communist. Like China is not communist because they have billionaires, or because it's using fossil fuel. And the idea of compromising in order to achieve the goal, the communist goal that these countries nevertheless have, is not being seen as communist, but it is. It's communist to survive and get along and have the objectives, the stated objectives and the structural objectives that they do have, and not to be called out by a sad left here in this country that's, you have to meet a certain standard according to them.
Yeah, thanks. Carl, did you have a question?
Mine is for Bill. You know, in about 18 months, you know, if we lose 4 seats in the Congress and 1 in the Senate, we're in deep trouble. So I'm convinced that the Chicano people in the southwestern United States, places like Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, have a very important role to play. So what can you do to, I mean, how can you inform us on the prospects of, you know, the Chicano vote playing a role in turning some of these states blue?
I'm going to take the migration questions first. I see them both kind of together. Central America, what do you think Mexico's role should be there? And Vicky's right. The U.S. government has always wanted, well, especially under Trump, said it's Mexico's problem, not ours. You take care of them. You police the border, the southern border. What do you think, Javier? And then Norma suggested that Mexico just take them all in.
Well, yeah, AMLO himself has said that they could be welcome here in Mexico to get a job, to get vaccinated. Not right now. I mean, what he started to do as soon as he gets into the presidency is trying to dismantle all the nets of human traffic. I mean, traffic of human beings by the mafias in the southern states, Chiapas, Oaxaca, Tabasco, Veracruz, and so on. So because they are still very powerful, they trafficked with the human beings. They kidnapped people, including children, and for the cartels to enslave them, to make them hitmen, or to sell their organs. And that's what he did during the first months and these first 2 years. Second, when there were some large amounts of people trying to get into the country, and the Mexican government stopped. That was prior to the pandemic, and Mexico's government stopped them. They were trying to register every one of those Central American citizens in order to know who is entering our country, but it was took by the press here in Mexico as a violation of human rights of Central American immigrants. But AMLO has offered, not just once, several times, offered people, Central American citizens, to stay in Mexico, to have a job, to settle here, to enjoy some social problems. We know that our economy is little, tiny in comparison with the one of the USA, but in our measures, with a job and some social support, we could have a normal life with dignity in our measures within our economy. So yes, it's a regional problem. That's why our national government is trying to put the emphasis in regional development of Central America and in Mexico, because as he says, AMLO says, the best foreign policy is the inner policy, because if you are happy, if you are satisfied, wherever you live, you are not forced to immigrate. You are not forced to go away to look for a better life in strange lands. That's why he's trying to put the accent in the internal policies in Mexico. You said something, Norma, about being communist, and what I think that to being that's another question, of course. But
China is communist, regardless of
let's not go there right now because it is a little off topic.
That's what I was saying, though, you know.
Yeah. So, and Carl, your question's a little bit off topic too, but Bill, do you want to just say anything to his question about the Latino vote in the Southwest? And
Well, I want to just say, first of all, I think we have to put on our side, we have to put enormous pressure on the Biden administration. What Kamala Harris said, if it's, we don't know everything that went down, but that's wrong. That's bad. That's a step backwards from this idea that they're going to reverse the Trump policies and so on. So I think, because that's do not come, which is Kamala Harris is quoted as saying, you're poor, you're subject to violence, you're supported to abuse. That's like saying, just say no to a drug addict.
That's to crush any intention she has of running for president in 24.
So I think that's on us. We have to put the pressure there. But I want to just say to Carl's question, I think it raises an important point for us in the United States. I think the number one key issue of everything, pandemic, economy, is voting rights, the defense and expansion of voting rights. There's a reason that the Republicans are in more than 24 states trying to erode the right to vote, and the right to vote are restricted so that it's almost impossible for people of color and other folks to vote. They don't think it's a slam dunk that they're going to win in 2022. So they're doing everything they can to suppress the vote. So I think the defense of the Voting Act and the expansion of the Voting Act, what's called a PRO Act, is to me the number one arena of struggle right now. Because if that legislation is passed, it precludes them from being able to gerrymander and suppress the vote. That would be a huge victory for us because it opens up this arena of struggle. So that would have an impact in Texas, in Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, all the places where we have large Latino and Black and Indigenous and Asian and poor white populations. That to me is the critical issue right now, the defense and expansion of voting rights. Because if we lose that one, it's not just going to be on immigration. It's not just going to be on foreign policy. It's going to be on every single issue: labor rights, women's rights, the economy, environment. That's what's at stake here. So I think that's what's really, really important.
so the only right we're going to have left is the right to bear arms as individuals.
Some will, not all of us.
Just want to put in last word here for the Mexico Solidarity Project. If you're not subscribed already, we put it into the chat there, the address where you can sign up to subscribe. You can also read previous articles in the archives. And what we try to do is to make it more people to people. It's not polemical. It's stories, interviews with real people on the ground, both Mexicanos in the United States, as well as Mexicans in Mexico, and what they're facing, what their personal lives are like. So hopefully you will subscribe to that and join us. Thank you. Thanks so much, Cliff.
Yeah, and
Everyone.
And let me just say, Metsu is the editor of the bulletin that comes out weekly. It's a very informative bulletin, and I would encourage you to subscribe to it. I think Metsu does a lot of the writing, and she's a very good writer. I have to compliment her on that.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I want to thank all of our panelists, as well as the others in the audience who have participated with their questions and in the discussion. I hope that you've all enjoyed it as much as I have. And of course, there's much more to talk about than we've been able to get to. Today's webinar, as well as past programs, are available on YouTube, accessible from our website, www.globaljusticecenter.org. And I want to also call your attention then to next week's webinar, which will turn to U.S. Politics, a talk by John Lawrence on transformative strategies and electoral politics. He's recently published an article in Democracy and Socialism on this topic. And if any of you would like to see that article, read it ahead of time and discuss with John on his ideas, send me an email and I can send you a copy of the article.
Okay.
And finally, thanks to our webinar team, Liz Mestras, Gregory Diamond, Roberto Robles, Olivia Canales, Bob Stone, and yours truly. And now, this is Cliff Durand signing off until next Monday.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure seeing you.
Yeah, thank you. If you want to stay around for a while and chat,